Today, I'm going to show you how I beat a hardcore Nuzlocke of Fire Red with just flying types. For this challenge, we're going to be using the traditional Nuzlocke rules, of course, with the additional rule that we can only use flying types. I'll also use, as mentioned earlier, the hardcore Nuzlocke rules, and just a couple of additional rules I've added for myself. Anyways, without further ado, let's get started with the video. We begin our journey entering Oak's lab, where we pick up a Charmander that I named Ray that I unfortunately can't use for now. I then head up to Viridian, pick up Oak's parcel, and then head back to his lab where he gives us the Pokeballs. I then head up to Route 1 where I encounter and catch a Pidgey that I named Catherine. After that, I deposit Ray, and then head over to Route 22 where I encounter and catch a Spearow that I named Rachel. I then head up to Viridian Forest where I find and catch a Caterpie that I named Jonathan. After that, I quickly level up Jonathan, evolving him into a Butterfree. I then take out a few trainers and eventually reach Pewter City. Now that I've reached Pewter City, I quickly level up all my Pokemon to 14 and then head into the gym. And while looking at Brock's team, you may think this fight would be quite difficult, but his first Pokemon, Geodude, actually has no rock moves. This allows us to send in Catherine and put his Geodude down to -6 accuracy with Sand Attack. After that, the next play is to send in Rachel, who gets it down to -6 attack with Growl, and then finally I send in Jonathan, who kills it after a couple confusions. And now, the important thing to note here is that because I edged all of my Pokemon, Butterfree levels up and learns Sleep Powder. I then use Sleep Powder, putting his Onix to sleep, and then kill it after a few confusions, giving us the win and our first badge. Now that we beat Brock, I head over to Route 3 where I take out a few trainers until I eventually reach Route 4 where I buy a Magikarp that I name Ross and then deposit for later. I then head into Mount Moon and encounter a Zubat that I catch and name Sasha. I then take out a few trainers, get out of Mount Moon, and then walk a little farther west, eventually reaching Cerulean City. After reaching Cerulean, I pick up Ross from the PC and evolve him. I then evolve Catherine and Rachel and head into the gym and begin the fight with Misty, leading with Rachel. This fight was honestly incredibly easy, as Rachel manages to take out a Staryu with a couple Fury attacks, her Starmie is then sent out, and then switch out into Ross, who easily kills it after a couple bites, giving us the easy win, and with it, the second badge. Now that I've beat Misty, I quickly evolve Sasha and then go into the rival fight leading Sasha, who easily takes out his entire team with a few wing attacks. I then take out a shitload of trainers and eventually reach Bill, who gives me the SS ticket. I then head back to Cerulean and go through the house, the whole ass hole in the wall, and then beat up the Rocket Run, who gives us Dig. After that, I go through the underground area, eventually reaching Route 6, where I take out a trainer and then reach Vermilion. Once I get there, I head west to Route 11, where I pick up a new Spearow that I trade for this girl's Farfetch that's named Chiding. Regardless, I then head over to the SS Sand, where I pick up the team for Rest and Brick Break, and then begin the rival fight leading with Rachel, who takes out his Pidgeotto and gets some damage off on his Raticate, but unfortunately, I'm forced to switch out, so I send out Ross, who easily takes out the rest of his team. After that, I head to the top floor of the ship and pick up the HM for Cut. I then head over to the gym, do the puzzle, take out a couple trainers, and then reach Surge, who, in all honesty, is probably one of the hardest fights in this challenge, as there's no clear strategy for this fight. Regardless, I begin the fight with him leading Sasha, who after a lucky bite flinch, manages to take out his Voltorb almost unscathed. He then sends out his Pikachu, who Sasha also easily takes out. Now, the main threat, Raichu, is sent out, and I decide to just stay in because I have no good switches, and unfortunately a Shockwave from Raichu takes Sasha out, giving us our first death, which is honestly not a huge loss. I decide to then send out Jonathan, who puts it to sleep with Sleep Powder, and knowing he'll full heal, the next turn, I just hit him with another Sleep Powder, and then switch into Rachel, who manages to finish the Raichu off after a couple Fury attacks, giving us the win and the third badge. After beating Surge, I head back to Cerulean and then head west to Route 9, where I beat a couple trainers, eventually reaching Route 10. After getting there, I heal up, then go into Rock Tunnel, where I beat a few trainers, and eventually find my way out, reaching Lavender Town. After getting to Lavender Town, I head east to Route 8, eventually reaching the Underground Path. I then eventually reach Route 7 and arrive at Celadon City. Upon getting there, I pick up the coin case and stop at the game corner, where I get a Scyther that I name Megan. After that, I head to Route 16, where I encounter and catch a Doduo that I name Tia. I then pick up the HM for Fly and head over to the gym. After going into the gym, I take out a couple trainers and then begin the fight with Erica, leading Rachel, who takes out her Victory Bell with a couple flies. She then sends out Tangela, who I also hit with a fly, but I get poisoned, so I switch out into Megan, who finished it off with a wing attack. Her final Pokemon, Vileplume, is then sent out and subsequently killed by Megan after a couple wing attacks, giving us the easy win, and with it, the fourth badge. Now that I've beat Erica, I head back to the Pokemon Center and swap Jonathan with Tia and Catherine with Ray. I then level up both of them, evolving Ray into Charizard and Tia into Dodrio. After that, I head into the Rocket Base, get the Lift Key, beat a couple trainers, and begin the Giovanni fight leading Ross, who easily one-shots his first two Pokemon with Water Pulse. He then sends out his final Pokemon, Kangaskhan, so I go for a Water Pulse and then decide to switch out into Ray, who easily takes it out with a couple Flamethrowers, giving us the win. After that, I head back to Lavender and go to the Pokemon Tower, where we begin the fight with our rival leading Megan, who I immediately switch out of and instead send in Ray, who one-shots his Pidgeotto with Flamethrower. He then sends out War Turtle, so I decide to switch right back into Megan, who takes out the War Turtle, Growlithe, and Execute. His final Pokemon, Kadabra, is then sent out, so I switch into Tia, who easily one-shots it with Tri-Attack. After that, I go through the Pokemon Tower, beating multiple trainers on the way, until I eventually reach the Ghost Marowak, who I easily kill after I switch into Ross and hit it with a few Water Pulses. I then quickly deal with the Team Rocket Grunts, and then get Mr. Future from the tower, who gives us the Pokeflute. After getting the Pokeflute, I fly over to Peter City and pick up the Old Amber. I then head over to Vermilion to pick up the bike voucher, and then finally go over to Cerulean and pick up the bike. After that, I go over to Cycling Road, eventually reaching Future City. Upon getting there, I head into the Safari Zone where I pick up the Gold Teeth and the HM for Surf. I then head on over to Saffron and into Silphco, where I quickly pick up the card key and begin the rival fight leading Ross, who takes out his Pidgeot with a couple Ice Beams, his Growlithe with a Surf, and his Execute with another Ice Beam. He then sends out his Alakazam, so I switch into Tia, who one-shots it with Tri-Attack. Finally, his Stutter Blastoise is sent out, so I switch into Ross, who gets some damage, but ultimately doesn't do a whole lot. So I switch back into Tia, get a Tri-Attack off, and then switch once again into Rachel, who finished it off with a couple Secret Powers, giving me the win. I then beat a couple more Rocket Grunts and begin the fight with Giovanni, leading Ray, who kills his Nidorino after a Flamethrower. His Rhyhorn is then sent out, so I switch into Ross, who one-shots it with Surf. His Kangaskhan is then sent out, so I switch back and forth between Ross and Megan a couple times, getting Intimidate off. I then hit it with a few Leers and switch into Ray, who hits it with a Wing Attack. I then switch once again, sending in Tia, who finished it off after a couple Tri-Attacks. Finally, his last Pokemon, Nidoqueen, is sent out, so I switch into Ross, who kills it after a couple Surfs. After that, I fly to Future City to prepare for the gym. I prepare for this gym by replacing Sheding with Jonathan, who I teach Psychic. I then head right into the gym, take out a few trainers, and then begin the fight with Koga, leading Ray, who easily one-shots his Coughing with Flamethrower. The Muck he sends out next is then also easily dealt with after I hit it with a couple Digs. Ray then finishes off his last two Pokemon quite easily with Flamethrower, giving us the easy win, and with it the 5th badge. The bright side of getting all of the events out of the way is that now I can go right to Saffron and right into Sabrina's gym. After completing her puzzle, I begin the fight leading with Tia, who, well, kind of just one-shots her entire team with Tri-Attack. Regardless, we have just like that gotten our 6th badge. Now that I've beat Sabrina, I head back to the Pokemon Center, heal up, and then fly over to Pallet Town. After that, I head down south to Route 21, eventually reaching Cinnabar Island. After getting there, I head over to the Fossil Restoration Lab and pick up an Aerodactyl that I named Seth. After that, I head over to the Pokemon Center and swap out Jonathan for Seth. I then go into the Pokemon Mansion and quickly complete the puzzle, if you can even call it that, and pick up the secret key. I then go back to the Pokemon Center, heal, and head into the gym. After heading into the gym, I do the quiz questions and begin the fight with Blaine leading Ross, who easily takes out his Growlithe with a Surf. He then sends a Ponyta, who I set up a Rain Dance on, and then subsequently one-shot his entire team with Rain-boosted Surfs, giving us the 7th badge. Now that I've beat Blaine, I head over to the Sevi Islands, which, well, yes, you can skip. I decided to go anyways because I thought I could get some helpful berries from Berry Forest. Regardless, while in Berry Forest, I stop the Hypno, take the girl back to her dad, and then go back to Cinnabar. After that, I fly over to Viridian and prepare for Giovanni. Now that I've prepared for Giovanni, I head into the gym, take out a couple trainers, and then begin the fight leading Ross, who kills both of his Rhyhorns with Surf. After that, he sends in a Dugtrio, so I set up Rain Dance and then proceed to one-shot his entire team with Surf, giving me the easy win and with it the final badge. After beating Giovanni, I head east to Route 22, where I begin the fight with our rival, leading with Seth, who easily takes out his Pidgeot after a couple HM powers. He then sends out his Blastoise, so I switch into Ross, who kills it after a couple Thunderbolts. Ross then one-shots his Rhyhorn, Growlithe, and Execute. His final Pokemon, Alakazam, is then sent out, so I hit it with a couple Surfs, killing it, giving me the win. After that, I go through all the badge gates and eventually reach the entrance to Victory Road. I then do all the puzzles real quick and skip all the trainers, which leads to me eventually reaching the Indigo Plateau. Once I get there, I begin preparing for the Elite Four. Now, before we get into everything, I don't know if you guys have ever looked at this game's Elite Four, but, well, a quick glance should show you that there's a lot of things here that, to put it lightly, absolutely shit on flying types. Bruno, despite having mostly fighting types, almost all of his Pokemon have a rock move, and because we have no rock resists, this makes it very hard to switch any Pokemon in. Lorelei is, well, I mean, come on, her entire team is pretty much designed to shit on flying types. The only real counter we have for Pokemon like Lapras and Dugong is Gyarados and Aerodactyl, which, let's be real, calling these two counters for either of these Pokemon is a stretch. Honestly though, the biggest problem isn't even a fucking Ice type, it's our Slowbro. The only kind of counter we have for Slowbro is Butterfree, and even then, getting Butterfree in could be incredibly difficult, as it will likely already be damaged before Slowbro comes out, which could be another huge problem. Finally, we have Lance. This guy's a huge problem with Pokemon like Aerodactyl as well. We don't really have an Aerodactyl counter, and before someone says, but what about your Aerodactyl? Which you would be right, Aerodactyl would be a good counter, except for the fact that my Aerodactyl has a fucking minus speed nature, meaning it's slower. The Dragonite and the Dragonair are also issues for different reasons, such as the fact that Gyarados with Ice Beam and Charizard with Dragon Claw are really the only viable options for these, as well, I have an Aerodactyl for Dragonite. It'll probably be too low before it's able to do anything. Regardless, for my E4 team, I decided to replace Rachel with Jonathan, and I just head right in. I begin the fight with Lorelei, leading with Seth, who managed to get a high roll Rock Slide, one-shotting Dugong. She then sends out Cloyster, and I just decide to Rock Slide again, as Cloyster's only attacking move is Dive. She then sets Hail up and heals. After that, I manage to take it out with a couple Ancient Powers. She then sets out her Jinx, and I decide to stay in, and in order to avoid the possibility of missing, I go for Ancient Power instead of Rock Slide, which kills the Jinx. Her Lapras is then sent out, so I decide to switch into Ross and then switch again into Ray, who unfortunately gets hit with a Confuse Ray upon switching in. I then hit myself, but after a couple turns, I manage to get a Sunny Day up. I'm then forced to switch, so I switch into Jonathan, who does unfortunately get hit by a crit, but does get a Sleep Powder off, giving me the chance to hit it with a couple Giga Drains. It then wakes up, so I hit it with another Sleep Powder and then switch into Seth, who finishes it off with Rock Slide. She then sends out her final Pokemon, Slowbro, and just like I had feared, Jonathan is way too low to send out, so I decide to switch into Ross, who managed to get some damage done, getting it to a little under half, also paralyzing it in the process. I then decide to switch into Megan, who takes a fat ass fucking Ice Beam, and then finished it off with a couple Wing Attacks, giving me the win. Now that I've beat Lorelei, I begin the fight with Bruno leading Jonathan, who easily one-shots his Onix with Giga Drain. He then sends out a Hitmonchan, so I hit it with the Sleep Powder, and then switch into Megan, hoping he doesn't get the turn 1 Wake Up, and he of fucking course gets the turn 1 Wake Up, and hits me with Rock Tomb, which wouldn't be a problem, except now I'm no longer faster. To be honest, I didn't plan for this, so I just decided to send out Ross to get the Intimidate off. I then set up Rain Dance and killed Hitmonchan pretty easily after a couple surfs, as the AI kind of just threw and used counter multiple times for no reason, but I mean, I'll take it. Regardless, he then sets up Machamp, who I also take out after a lucky crit. His Hitmonlee is then sent out, so I switch into Ray, who kills it with a quick fly. Finally, his last Pokemon, Onix, is sent out, so I switch into Ross, who hits it with a Surf, killing it, giving me the win. Now that some of the harder fights are out of the way, I begin the fight with Agatha, leading Tia, who takes out her Gengar after a couple Drill Pecks. She then sets out her Golbat, so I switch into Seth, who easily one-shots it with Rock Slide. Her Arbok is then sent out, so I switch into Ross, predicting Iron Tail. I then hit it with Earthquake, one-shotting it. She then sets out her second Gengar, so I switch into Seth, and then back into Ross to get an Intimidate off. I then try to hit it with Surf, but unfortunately get put to sleep. So I switch back into Tia, use Taunt, and then kill it with Drill Peck. Her final Pokemon, Haunter, is then brought out, and because its only attacking move is Dream Eater, I just hit it with Taunt and kill it with Drill Peck, winning me the fight. Finally, it's time for what may be the hardest fight in the run. I begin the fight leading Ross, who easily takes out his Gyarados after a couple Thunderbolts. He then sends out his Aerodactyl, who I hit with Surf and almost kill. Now, me being a dumbass, I decided to switch into Seth, thinking he was going to heal, completely forgetting the fact that he already used his healing items on Gyarados. At this point, I just decided to switch back into Ross to at least get an Intimidate off. I then switch into Megan, trying to sack her off, but for some reason he chooses to use Hyper Beam, so I just use Wing Attack, hoping maybe it'll kill, but it doesn't, so we lose Megan, giving us our second death. I then decide to send in Tia, who gets hit with a Hyper Beam, and then kills it with Tri Attack. His first Dragonair is then sent out, and easily killed after I hit it with a couple Tri Attacks. The second Dragonair is then brought out, so I hit it with another Tri Attack, and then switch into Jonathan, who puts it to sleep, but unfortunately, on the next turn, when I switch into Ray, he wakes up. Luckily, it didn't end up mattering, as he managed to dodge the Hyper Beam. I then go for Dragon Claw and kill it. Finally, his last Pokemon, Dragonite, is brought out, and honestly was very easy to deal with, as I got a very lucky Dragon Claw crit, which leads to me killing him on the next turn. Regardless, it's now time to move on to the champion. So, I begin the fight leading Seth, who easily kills his Pidgeot after a Rock Slide and Rock Tomb. He then sends out his Blastoise, so I switch into Ross, who kills it with a couple Thunderbolts. His Rhydon is then brought out and immediately dies after I hit it with Surf. He then sends out his Alakazam, who Ross also kills after a couple Surfs. Executor is then brought out, so I just decide to sack Ross here as well. I could probably play around it. It's the final fight, so there isn't much of a point of risking anything. After Ross dies, I send out Jonathan and go for Silverwind, completely forgetting that the Alakazam setup Reflect, so I get put to sleep, which forces me to switch to Tia, who finishes it off with Drill Peck. His final Pokemon, Arcanine, is then sent out, so I go for Tri Attack and get a lucky Paralysis. I then switch into Seth, who then kills it after a couple Rock Slides, and with that, we have beaten this challenge. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you guys hit the like button and subscribe. It is free after all, you know. And if you have any ideas for what challenge I should do next, drop them in the comments below.